the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Robert here, usually the exits are there. I'm not on. Sorry about that.
Sorry.
Can I have a motion to open up the planning board meeting on April 9th?
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
First item on the agenda is a public hearing for Lands of Tower Hill subdivision. I think there's a couple of outstanding items before we open the hearing. All right, John?
They have a couple minor items in my memo, and I will highlight the fact, Madam Chair, that they are relatively minor.
Okay.
Basically, to recap, you did reaffirm and determine that the existing neg deck is consistent with this current application, so no further environmental review is necessary. That allowed us to set the public hearing. You put to bed, and you will further put to bed when you adopt the resolution, if and when you do, the matter of flag lots. You made a determination that the two longer lots do not constitute a flag lot under the definition in your code. I've asked Rich to give me a little better idea, because the proposal here is, he's got the fully developed driveway for the one lot, and he's given me a 20 scale, he's given me everything I've asked for, except he has no plans to build that driveway unless and until it's approved, but they do want to put the apron in. So I need an interim plan to see what that apron looks like. And Rich discussed it with me tonight. I think we're both on the same page, and he will provide that in the next submission. And then the last is, if you remember, way back when, there's a very sophisticated drainage system that takes all the water from one side and carries it across this lot and ultimately down the town road. It goes across all three lots. So what I've asked is a drainage easement, and rather than basically define it, they kind of put some additional language in the cross-access and maintenance agreement for the driveway that covers the drainage. All I've asked is that language be duplicated on the subdivision plat, so there's no confusion, and it's a disclosure document, and again, I think that's no issue for Rich. And other than that, Madam Chair, you are free to open the public hearing.
Paul has reviewed or is in the process of reviewing the easement agreement?
Yes, he's given them a first cut through it, and he and I discussed it again today, so they do have it in their hands, and he's made modifications, and I think it's in process. I think the two attorneys are, I think, yes.
Okay, all right, good. Any other questions from the board before we open the public hearing? Okay? All right, can I have a motion to open the public hearing for the Lands of Tower Hill subdivision? Second. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, public hearing. Anybody here to speak? Anyone? Okay, can I have a motion to close the public hearing for the Lands of Tower Hill subdivision?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so next steps, I think we are to authorize the consultants to prepare a resolution of approval for the 423 meeting.
Yes.
Before that happens, we need to have all the requested documents in place. So that's the items that John mentioned, the easement agreement. It would be helpful to have them by the 16th so that the consultants have a week to review and make sure that everything is all set before they prep the resolution. Is that doable, Rick?
For us, yes. I'm not sure where the attorneys, if they're having.
But the attorneys,
That's sorted.
I think that can be a condition.
that was a condition, Madam Chair, of the prior resolution. It could be a condition of this one if the board so chose.
Okay.
But we're farther along this time than we were last time.
Okay, so 416, Rich,
Yeah.
from today, get everything in writing, and then we'll authorize Paul to draft up a resolution for the 23rd.
That sounds great.
Okay. Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next up is 11. Public hearing.
Give me a minute to catch up with you. Okay. On 11, if I may, before you may open open the public hearing, we have a little administrative task that needs to be taken care of. Basically, we need to adopt a negative declaration under seeker. And I apologize, you should find in your packet a short environmental assessment form, part 2 and part 3, for your consideration. I'll walk through it. And basically, just a couple, I'm going to jump right to the part 3, because I think there are important aspects of looking at the balance of this. And the first is, this is a minor subdivision. It involves the creation of one new lot, and there are no physical improvements proposed as part of this action. The second thing is, they did go to the zoning board of appeals, and they had a full vetting at the zoning board of appeals to obtain an area variance, which would allow the creation of a lot that was under the allowable lot acreage. In this case, the lot size will ultimately be 8.7. And the reason they did that is because of where it's situated with regards to the historic area next door, and it's right on the road, and it would be in keeping with what's surrounding it. And it also falls and fits rather neatly with the natural barriers, the tree lines, the stone walls, etc. So it forms a nice, neat little lot. And having said that, when you start to look apart at all the impacts, they are, I've checked them all for you. They're either small or no. And in most cases, there's no. Because there is no physical improvement, it's merely a land partition, it takes advantage of the natural barriers, so there's really no issues here. So my recommendation to the board, if you are so inclined, would be make a determination that based on the information and analysis in the supporting documentation, that the proposed action will not result in any significant adverse environmental impacts. And to that end, Paul has prepared 2 documents for your consideration. One would be the full negative declaration, and the other is a simple resolution adopting that negative declaration. But first, you need to accept the part 2 and part 3.
So I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
If there were a structure on
There is a structure on the lot.
I mean, what you said, there's not a new structure over on.
There's no physical improvements. These are just existing lots that are
Would
being
your
part.
opinion be the same if there was a physical improvement?
In this case, other than Board of Health, yes, because the lots are so large. They're greater than 5 acres both. One's 100 and some odd, the other's 8.7. So there would be no real impact. Sir.
Any other questions?
Yeah. Thank you.
All right, can I have a motion to adopt the negative declaration for 11, I guess I should say, for the 11 subdivision?
11 minor subdivision.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Madam Chair, we can now move to the resolution. It's a resolution adopting a formal negative declaration under the State Environmental Quality Review Act for the 11 minor subdivision. It's dated today, April 9th. And if it's okay with the board, I'll read it now, therefore be it resolved.
I just have a question, is there reference in here to the ZBA's determination?
In this resolution, I don't think there was.
Okay, doesn't matter, I'm just curious.
They now therefore be it resolved as follows. The planning board issues a secret negative declaration to the project, concluding that the project will not create any significant adverse environmental impacts, and a draft environmental impact statement will not be prepared. And number 2, the planning board adopts and incorporates herein by reference the attached negative declaration for the project under seeker. And the planning board directs the attached negative declaration to be filed, distributed, and published as required by the seeker regulations 6 NY CRR Part 617.12, and be it further resolved, this resolution shall take effect immediately.
Do you need a motion?
We have discussion.
Oh.
Or we make a motion.
You-
I just have one
Yeah.
comment to not hold up the vote. But do we agree that we're going to start sending this type of material that involves environmental issues to the CAC and review it to get their input. And I think that's something we should do going forward. I don't want to hold this project.
This is a lot, we agreed that we would send conservation analyses to the CAC. This is a simple lot line
Okay.
adjustment, we don't have a matter of practice send them to the CAC. We're just, drawing lines on the map.
Typically speaking, in the past, anything that has been classified by this board as minor has not gone to the CAC. So anything that is on the higher end, a major or a significant, that would be sent to the CAC. And I don't think there's any requirements under your code to send a subdivision, but you have done that in the past because some of the larger ones may have a substantial impact.
And even though this involves secret, it would not go to the CAC. Even regardless of
The CAC does, to be blunt, it's a matter of choice for this board, whether you direct something to the CAC. You can send everything, or you can selectively send things that are substantial and significant.
Thank you.
Alright, so there's a motion and a second on the table.
Who is the motion?
I didn't get that.
Jamie?
Second.
On that one.
Okay,
You want to do the roll?
I'll do the roll if you don't mind. Save Judy. Robert Boyles, Jr., Chairperson, is absent. Nina Peak, Deputy Chairperson.
Yes.
John Stephanopoulos is absent. James Walsh is absent. Walter Dietrich.
Yes.
Kenneth Kapolsky.
Yes.
Jamie Vidiello.
Yes.
Motion carries. So you now have a neg deck, and you are now free, Madam Chair, to open the public hearing.
Alright, motion to open the public hearing on 11 subdivision.
So moved.
Second.
In favor?
Aye.
Any comments? Anyone? Okay, motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we have a resolution of approval.
You do. This is one that we kind of forecast ahead of time, and you do have a resolution. And this one does mention the area variance, Madam Chair. And if it's the pleasure of the board, this one also contains those admonitions that we've been adding in bold that puts the requirements to satisfy the conditions and actually perform the filing on the applicant rather than the town. So if you wish, I'll read the now therefore be it resolved.
Please do.
Now therefore be it resolved that in accordance with the subdivision law, the planning board hereby approves the minor subdivision plan, 11 subdivision by Kurt K. Horton, L.S., dated November 2nd, 2024, the approved plat, subject to the following conditions. Confirmation by the planning board's engineer that any remaining technical comments have been satisfied. Confirmation by the planning board attorney as to the form of the deeds implementing the subdivision. And confirmation that the applicants have paid any outstanding invoices of the planning board's consultants incurred in connection with this application. And please note, absent an extension requested by the applicants and granted by the planning board, if all requirements of the conditional final plat approval have not been certified as completed within 180 days of the original approval, the conditional approval shall automatically terminate and be revoked without need for affirmative planning board action. Be it further resolved that upon a resolution of approval and original Mylar of the plat, acceptable for filing in the Dutchess County Clerk's office, and 4 copies of the subdivision plat shall be provided by the applicant and presented to the chairperson of the planning board. And be it further resolved that the planning board hereby authorizes the planning board chairman to stamp and sign the approved plat, certifying it as the approved final plat upon the applicant's compliance with the above conditions and the final plat submission requirements of the subdivision law. And, again, please note, the signature of the chairperson of the planning board constituting final approval of the subdivision plat shall expire within 62 days from the date of the approval, unless within such 62-day period, the approved plat shall have been filed in the office of the Dutchess County Clerk. Be it further resolved that pursuant to the subdivision law, no changes, erasures, modifications, or revisions shall be made to the approved final plat after its signing by the planning board chairperson. In the event that any final plat, when recorded, contains such changes, that plat shall be considered null and void, and the planning board shall institute proceedings to have said plat stricken from the records of the Dutchess County Clerk's Office and the Town Clerk's Office. Be it further resolved that within 5 days of the date of this resolution, a copy of the resolution shall be filed in the office of the Town of Amenia Town Clerk, and a copy of this resolution shall be mailed to the applicants within that same 5-day period, and be it further resolved that the resolution shall take effect immediately.
Can I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Okay, I'll, roll?
Roll. Robert Boyles Jr. is absent. Nita Peak, Deputy Chairperson.
Yes.
John Stephanopoulos, absent. James Walsh, absent. Walter Dietrich.
Yes.
Ken Topolsky.
Yes.
Jamie Viniello.
Yes.
Motion carries. It's approved.
Okay, so parking lot, so you guys know the, just read the bold print on the resolution for the signing, filing requirements, just to make sure that that's all met.
Okay, you said something about deeds, am I gonna write descriptions for these parcels?
Just a description for the new parcel.
The new parcel.
Yeah, I'll talk to Paul.
Does it have to be, from an attorney, or can I do that?
You can write the description, the instrument needs to come from an attorney.
Ultimately, it's gotta come through an attorney.
Great. Thank you.
And you should not talk as much as you do.
Keep from putting my foot in my mouth.
Okay. Next up, Dean Step.
I'm gonna commandeer that one if you guys don't mind.
Yeah, good there for.
Just as a short preface, so we let you guys know that George James was not gonna be here tonight, he still wanted to come in and present, which is cool. There's 2 items, I guess just go through the revisions, and then we can have a very brief discussion, but like I said, we're gonna have this substantive discussion on the 23rd.
Yep. And that was our intention the whole time. Really, what we wanted to do, because it's been a couple of months, is just introduce some of the changes that happened to the subdivision plat, and just kind of outline to the board members what the items were that we actually submitted. So for everyone's, I'm just going to briefly go over it. So what we have here is a conventional major subdivision. It's within the RA and RR zoning district, so that's 10-acre and 5-acre zoning districts. So as you can note on the plat that we have here, 2 of the previously proposed project parcels have been removed, now leaving only 2 existing parcels, which would be the westernmost and the southernmost Keene Stud equestrian facilities. So that's reduced the total acreage from 704 acres to 605. So really the bulk of the acreage is still within the 2 project parcels. Now we previously had 27 residential development lots. Now we have 23 farmstead lots, which you can see arranged on here. We've maintained the 2 forest conservation parcels. We did split up the Keene Stud equestrian facility parcel, which was 1 previous lot. Now it's 2 separate lots, separating buildings and then the rinks from each other. And then we have 3 rural lane right-of-ways, the same as we did last time. So one thing I wanted to note about the right-of-ways is that we previously had a right-of-way that went like this, coming through all the way around. So now what we've done is we developed a loop road concept with a cul-de-sac for those lots for frontage. So understanding that a more substantive review is going to be done when George James is here, I just wanted to point out, so since we previously submitted this plat, the applicant has really mulled over what George was saying in his comment letters and comments received from the boards, and has really taken a hard look at the subdivision and how best to preserve the Amenia view shed, which is the big issue here, while also allowing something that's fair to the applicant. So what we've done is we've essentially, what we had was previously developed was building envelopes, which restricted residential development within those envelope squares. We've essentially enhanced those previous envelopes. So what we've done is, we've established a residential perimeter, which is an area within the residential lot that can be developed for residential use. And then we've also developed a residential area, which is the actual footprint that any of those residential uses are permitted to be built within. So within the residential perimeter, the residential area can shift around, but it can not be greater than 10% of the total residential lot, which means that 90% of each residential parcel will be preserved as open and agricultural space, while only 10% will be reserved for those residential uses. So that's really what that establishes there. And this is a mechanism that can be approved or reviewed during the site plan phase. Because as we've discussed in the past, each one of these residential lots will need to return to the board for a more detailed site plan review. So we just thought that this would help control the areas and protect some of the more sensitive use sheds that the town has identified. Another added restriction we did was the establishment of a no vertical build zone. So this is an area that we've discussed in the past as having the highest visibility from Delaware Hill. So in that area, there will be no structures allowed to be constructed. So again, that doesn't allow any residential facilities or agricultural facilities to be developed within that sensitive hill area. So in addition to kind of a reconfiguration of the lots and the building envelopes, we've also provided the board a covenant of deed restrictions. So this is something that the applicant has developed by lot to limit the height or the scale of development that can actually be constructed on each of the residential lots. So you can see the covenant, and then we also provided like an 11 by 17 fact sheet. It's essentially an enhanced bulk regulation table, which builds off the existing bulk regs for the site, which is what these conventionally subdivided lots would have used, and provides even further restriction onto those individual parcels. So from those, what we did is we reached out to our fellow consultants, Saratoga Associates, who the board is very familiar with their work, having done past visual impact studies. And we had them render both leaves on and leaves off conditions of the total development that could be expected for this. And this is based off of the deed restrictions that we've outlined in the covenant and in that standalone exhibit. So ultimately, what we think that this new, these tweaks will ultimately preserve 90% minimum of the total project site acreage as open space and agricultural land. So our goal, as we said, is not to do an in-depth review, but really is to reintroduce the project and the changes, explain what has been submitted, so that's the renderings and the deed restrictions, and to get some initial feedback from the board so we can write down some questions and have answers and the information you are requesting available at this more substantive meeting on the April 23rd. So with that, I'm looking forward to hearing any feedback that the board may have.
If I may, Madam Chair, there's a couple things. You can't review what they've submitted unless you review all the pieces together. So in other words, they have this plat, they have prepared a full restrictive covenant document, and then they prepared, as Peter indicated, basically a lot-by-lot breakdown of the bulk regulations, and they carried it out quite a distance. One of the things I did notice is there's no lack of clarity in the written words, The written words tell you exactly what they mean, and if you track them with the table, it all seems to flow. There is a bit of a disconnect between the written words and the drawings, because you're limited to how you can show things. So when you start to break down the line weights, there are things that it doesn't neatly translate the way Peter suggested it does. So I would suggest they probably need to go back and they've got some things written there, agricultural areas, barn zone. There are things that need some clarification. For instance, in the one lot that Rich showed that goes from the internal road all the way down to the town road or the county highway, they have that no vertical development zone, but then on the bottom there near the county highway, they have, I think, what's called a barn zone, which you kind of gotta, they don't all relate to one another neatly on the drawing. So that's one of the things I think that needs to be clarified, and just because the written words make a lot of sense, and you kind of almost need to read them first and then go back and see how they presented it. But I do think there just needs to be some tightening up between the graphic presentation and the language in your restrictive covenant. I'm not faulting the restrictive covenant, that'll get pulled apart as we go forward, but making sure you understand what they're saying is critical, and I think you just need to spend a little time, Peter, fine-tuning what's shown and how it's shown and how it's noted. And you might want to pull out a sample lot, one that has everything on it, and describe exactly what each is intended to be. But I leave that up to you, but it just, I went through it, and it was kind of a slog until I figured out what they were trying to tell me, and it's tough to review sometimes.
The idea is that it should not be a slog.
I didn't want to say that, Madam Chair.
So fundamentally, just a sort of a threshold question, in George's original review memo, or James's original review memo of June 21st, 2024, he asked that before any photo simulations were produced, you guys, and once the 3D model was done, you sent it to him for his review to make sure that it was, constructed and that he provided a review. And then he reiterated that request when you guys were back here in August, and then again in October of 2023 at a meeting here. And my understanding is that didn't happen, that George did not review the model before the photo simulations were done. And I guess the threshold question is why not?
Well, for our perspective, this is the review, right? We are submitting to the planning board so that their consultants can look at it. In the past, we've seen projects where, again, we've seen George James comfortable with Saratoga Associates modeling procedure, and we've provided all the documentation that shows how it was modeled. So that's really why, again, we want to jumpstart this because we've gone through multiple visual impact studies of this project at this point. So we want the board's feedback and we want George James's feedback. We are very comfortable that the model has been generated the way that the board and George James are comfortable with.
Yeah, it was not the methodology that he requested to see, it was the actual model before you guys went ahead and did the photo simulation. So that was the request, so that he could take a look at it and just make sure that he was on board, that you guys would come to this planning board and show us the model. We would have a discussion about that before any photo simulations. And I think the conversation originally came up because there are a lot of aerial photographs, and the intention is not, no one's ever going to be flying over this looking at it that way, so all of the aerial photography that shows the full built-out scenario is not in fact necessary. I think George said that a couple times. That was really the genesis of the request for the model, but it's his question, my question is, he specifically asked to be able to review it before the simulations were done to save you all time and money generating the photo sims on a model that he didn't have a chance to review. So I think that's just a threshold question. You guys should just think about it, give it some thought. It's gonna come up the April 23rd meeting. Why didn't, you know, if he's gonna issue a request memo and then reiterate a couple times, you guys came here and you're like, what do you wanna see? What do you wanna see? And George says, this is what I wanna see, and he still hasn't seen it. So, you know, it's gonna come up on the 23rd. I think we should just be prepared to answer that question.
But there is time to give it to them.
They're already done. The
But-
simulations are already
Yeah,
done.
but it's their risk and expense if George says,
Yeah.
And we figured that with all the covenants and the restrictions, that the board deserves a crack to see what is going on and the efforts that the applicant has been made to work with the town and preserve this. So, again, George he wasn't reviewing deed restrictions when he was first looking at it. He was looking at a full build out. This has now been developed so that it matches the deed restrictions of the site. But understood, we'll be discussing this at the 23rd.
a question for you, in those simulations, one of the things that is obviously very visible are not just the buildings, but also the necessary greenery that will get added around some of the houses. Are there deed restrictions, amongst the deed restrictions, is there anything related to the owner's ability to add greenery?
Add greenery?
Yeah.
Yes. I believe there is a restriction specified that per 1,000 square feet of land, it requires 1 or 2 trees per 1,000 feet of impervious or building area.
Okay.
So again, and this is what I wanted to present to the board, is that there is stuff in here, language, that does allow for this dedicated addition to here. So-
And what I wanted to suggest to the board is, everyone seems to be focusing on the visual. The way that they've kind of structured this, everything grows out of the restrictive covenants, so you really you can't look at the visual without reading the restrictive covenants at the same time.
Right.
That's why it's, and to your point, the restrictive covenants carry a whole series of subsections. Dimensional requirements, no further subdivisions, driveway issues, conserved lots, and then they go into design standards. And they reference rural siting provisions, they reference exterior lighting, they reference color and building materials, they reference fencing and landscaping. And to Peter's point, at least 2 large trees shall be planted per 1,000 square feet of residential floor area proposed to be developed on a lot. That's a pretty generous in certain respects and restrictive addition. And the term large tree shall mean shade or evergreen tree that at maturity would be 35 feet or more in height. So you're getting some detail, and that's what I was kind of surprised at is the way everybody's focused on the visual, where realistically, the visual flows from these deed restrictions. And I had this discussion with Paul today. I think everybody kind of didn't focus on those, but you really do need to focus on those, because they're what determines what's shown on those plans. So, and that's my recommendation to you is, when you look at this, you have to have that declaration open and going through it.
And this makes it a little easier for the board to assess impact, and George Gaines as well, because he can look at the visuals compared to the deed restrictions and say, yeah, this matches, it's visually showing what the site is maximally allowed to be developed as.
This is my first time dealing with this strictly covenant, so I have some questions which might be obvious, but I don't know what they are. And that is this in perpetuity?
This would be filed, and it would run with the land, so the answer is yes. And we have finished.
Even when the deed is transferred?
Yes. And there are certain language that has to be in there, and I know the attorneys are still hashing it out. So the second homeowner down the road doesn't say, I didn't know about it and I'm not gonna do it. So there's certain language that has to be common to all these. So the answer to your question is, properly done, they are run with the land and are enforceable through the life of the project, unless there are agreed upon changes by all parties who may be privy to that. Give you a perfect example. I bought a subdivision that didn't allow mother-daughters. I own a mother-daughter. I had to go back to everybody in the subdivision and get them to sign off on it before I could be allowed to build a mother-daughter. So they are enforceable and they do run with the land.
But in that case, you just needed to get the other members of the subdivision In this case, they would have to come back to the planning board or zoning board.
The town is going to end up being a party of this. You'll have a right, but not an obligation. So when they do go to make a change, you would have to be one of those parties that would sign off on it.
And,
And please forgive me, I'm not an attorney, so
No,
the
yeah,
exact
yeah.
terminology.
and in your experience, the town has an enforcement right of those restrictions. If all of a sudden somebody builds a much bigger house, somehow we permit it, or whatever it is, we realize it, or we see them.
Yep, no, that was the whole discussion we had early on. The intent was to make it enforceable by the town, rather than putting it in a conservation easement, and both parties assured, based on the research they did, that we could make it enforceable by the town.
And just a note, comment on that, is that each lot does return back to the site plan review, so it will appear in front of the board, and you'll be able to look at the covenant restrictions and see that what is proposed does match. So then in your right, then you can deny and say, it doesn't match, make this match.
What are the size of each of the lots?
Smallest and largest thing.
Smallest and largest. The smallest is, I believe, 10 acres. 7? Oh, yeah, it's 7, and that's within the 5-acre zoning district, which is here.
I'm trying to figure out how many square feet 10% of the lot is allowed. How big the house would be if it's 10% of the lot. That's the largest.
If I may, Quanto is, one of the owners and developers behind the idea. A big thing what we try to do is listen to the board and look to find a way to provide additional measures for the HOA, for the town, and for the planning board to understand what the future rules of the game are, which is the deed restrictions, which are considerably more restrictive than the town zoning. One of the things we did is, rather than say impervious surface, which is what the town law stipulates, we put in a footprint size for every house. So every lot, depending on the lot, depending on the location, we put in a footprint size. We also went ahead and restricted the height. So the heights in the town law is 35 feet. We made them all 28 feet, but some of the more visual ones, we made them 21 feet. So really looking at ways to provide the town and the HOA the tools so that in the future buyer wants to build a house, and they come in front of the board, hey, the intent here is for this to look like an agricultural community, which is why we're willing to put in there, the 90% of land has to be used for agricultural and or open space area. And that runs with the HOA, it runs in perpetuity. That is the goal. So the lots are 7 to 45 acres, all the forest and the ridge lines are all preserved, all the wetlands are all preserved. And it goes with an idea of having smaller farms, which is consistent with Dutchess County. About 50% of the farms in Dutchess County are 50 acres or less. So this, we know will help ensure that this land stays agricultural in perpetuity, and that anyone that wants to build in the future, make sure it's consistent with the views and protecting the views from the town.
But you will see again in the restrictive covenant, to Juan's point, each lot, for instance, this is lot 2. It says enhanced development restriction, minimum lot area, total farm area, total residential area, residential perimeter, minimum road frontage, minimum front setback, side setback, rear yard height, maximum residential building height, maximum impervious surface, maximum residential footprint for a principal house, maximum residential footprint for a secondary residence, total maximum residential footprint, maximum non-residential accessory structure, one would take that to be a barn or an exterior shed, and then maximum accessory apartment size. So this goes well beyond what you customarily see in your zoning code, and they are willing to add that as a part of the restrictive covenants. And they have one for each lot. That's why Peter said there's a summary. They have a spreadsheet summary and all the lots are laid out. But essentially, in the restrictive covenant, they have one lot on each page. So, to your point, they've kind of gone they did what you asked for, maybe a little overkill, but that's why I think that's what kind of got lost here. Everybody, oh, we're gonna look at visual. No, we finally got a whole package, and that's what you need to look at. Okay, did I say that correctly?
Does anybody, do you have extra copies for the board? Extra hard copies of the package? Okay, so.
Yeah.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, and if there are any other questions come up between now and the next meeting, I encourage the board to reach out. We'll prepare answers and make sure we have the answers that you were looking for. So again, thank you all for having us tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, who's in Cohen, 54 Kennel Road, Brown Mountain Store? Hi,
Hello,
your name?
my name is Mitch, I'm the project manager for obviously we're fine. So I unfortunately don't have a big size on a postboard, because I've got a few hours ago that Staples couldn't deliver. That's really fun. But I wrote enough copies for everybody to like follow along.
Yeah, that'd be
Sure.
great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, you wanna just give a quick presentation, just fill the board in on the application? What you guys are gonna do?
So what we're trying to do is just install a ground mounted solar array at 54 Mill Road. The solar array is going to consist of 20 modules that will be split between two arrays. Each array will hold 14 modules each.
I think
Is the one right here, does it show red on the button?
No.
Okay, you press the little button there, should make it come up right there, the white one.
I know, but like, no.
Maybe that's why we didn't hear Kurt talk.
How about now?
Yeah.
All right, round two. So,
perfect.
we are looking to install a ground mounted solar array at 54 Mill Road. The array will consist of 28 modules with 2 voltage inverters. Each will be 7.6 kilowatts. The 2 arrays will hold 14 panels each, and each array will have 1 inverter designated for it. They'll be split between the north array and the south array. The system will produce 15.26 kilowatts DC. The house sits on 34.5 acres, and each array consists of 140 square feet for a combined total of 680 square feet, or 0.015 of an acre. The array is well screened already with natural screening in place due to it being on 34.5 acres. The array is 174 feet from the front of the yard and River Road, 975 feet from the west of the property line, 407 feet from the east side of the property line, and 647 feet from the rear property line, which conveniently keeps us within your setback requirements of 100 feet. There will only be 2 trenches added to the array onto the site. The first trench will be 25 feet, which will connect the south array to the north array, and the next trench will go from the back side of the north array into the garage, over and to connect to their main service panel. The array will be 11 feet at its tallest, 11 feet 3 inches, and will be 44 inches at its shortest to the ground. And that's kind of a little bit of what we're doing, and I'm going to answer any questions that you may have.
All right, John,
I do have a memo. I can go through it real quickly. Basically, it is in the rural agricultural zoning district. It's also in the upland aquifer, and there's a very small portion on one end that's in the stream corridor protection. This is nowhere near that. The project is the installation of a ground-mounted solar array system consisting of 2 detached arrays. The type of regulation is regulated, this type of installation is regulated by your code under section 122.52.1, solar energy systems. The proposed installation meets the definition of a ground-mounted solar energy system. If you recall, and you've done this before, it has to be a percentage of, less than a certain percentage of the house footprint. It falls well within that, based on the available information. It is, they are permitted as an accessory structure to a legally permitted structure, and this is a legally permitted house, so it is going to be permissible. The application needs to be corrected. The application is for special permit according to the applicable code section, and actually the building inspector's denial letter, you need site plan approval. So you have to relabel it site plan approval.
All the applications are holding are the new updated ones.
Okay, I'm just going by what I had in my file, so. The next is a type 2 action under seeker. We recommend that the planning board determine this to be a type 2 action and not subject to further environmental review. The agricultural data statement does need to be amended. It should reflect site plan approval, and although the parcel itself is not in the agricultural district, there are certain parcels around it within 500 feet that are in the agricultural district, and custom and practice of the town is if the property is in the ag district, we like to see it noticed and they get notification. So that needs to be corrected. The plan set I got said there were 5 plans in the set, I only got 4, so something was missing. It happens. The district, it's a 5-acre minimum, being in a lot of minimum of 5 acres, you need to be 100 foot from any property line. In this case, the district has a 10-acre minimum, and they are greater than 100 feet from all property lines. As is customary for these things, they fall under the site plan regulations, and as such, there's a whole series of things that need to be required according to the town code section. I would submit to you that you have waived them on other applications. It's appropriate to waive them here. All we need is a written request from the applicant to waive those, and they should make an effort to enumerate them. You know, we don't need topography, we don't need other things. There's an issue of screening. This property kind of sits in the middle of a pretty much heavily wooded area, and you can see the house, and you can see where the arrays fall, and it's kind of deceptive because Kennel Road is higher than the house. So the house sits below Kennel Road, but then the house continues down slope toward Tower Hill Road. So I don't think that they're visible, but you may want to talk to the applicant about visibility and perhaps ask for a few photographs or from the nearby roads to make sure it's not visible. I don't think it's going to be. And then the last one requires verification of utility notification. That's a typical letter I think you folks normally obtain from the utility. We didn't get that, so
Yeah,
we will need that.
I'm on day 4 of it, and they have 10 days to review the application, so be prepared.
Yeah. Good luck, my friend. And other than that, this is a minor project, and as a minor project, you don't need to hold a public hearing if you do not wish.
John, a question for you, or maybe you will answer. So when the permission is predicated on something like the screening, the electric engineer, that it dies, it'll be replaced as soon as practical, but that now lives in the original application. So years later, the next homeowner, the stuff, the screening dies, where does that live to be enforced, or even be known about?
Because they're getting site plan approvals run forever.
Okay.
So technically speaking, you could enforce site plan approval, and that would normally appear as a condition. Now, I don't know what happens when residential homes get sold, but usually there's a bunch of paperwork that gets associated with a solar array. If it was on your house, for instance, there's arrangements that you have to make between the new owners, and so we could reference it and ask that they reference it in the deed. It's up to you. I'd have to ask Paul specifically.
I mean, usually it comes in the form of somebody coming in and complaining.
That's okay.
Right, so the building, and they go back to the original material, and there was a requirement, and that owner is obligated to meet the. But we wouldn't.
No,
But we could.
I'm really thinking the instance where there's some further subdivision, it's now visible, and should have subdivisions not visible years later.
You know, in this particular case, I struggled with it. I don't know whether you can look up the hill and see it from Tower Hill Road.
Okay.
If you could see the house, I doubt you're gonna see an array that's 11 foot off the ground, when most of the trees around it are probably greater than 50 foot tall.
But I think it's worth, going out and taking a couple of photos from public rights of way of
Yeah.
where
Those are actually some of the ones we took during our site evaluation, and then I had the homeowner also take pictures, so those are from October of last year, and then as of 2 weeks ago.
and this is from.
That's facing each property,
Not from the road.
not from those.
Yes,
But we can get a picture of the road.
from a public right of way.
Yeah, we do that.
Thank you.
I would agree.
I'll have to look at those.
Yeah, the only thing I wasn't able to update was the PT, the permission to construct letter from the utility company, and then the written request that you asked for, but I gave you all 5 of the plans, the photos, and I updated the application.
Okay, we'll take a look at it.
Awesome.
And so, like I said, unless you see a compelling reason, you don't need a public hearing.
What does everyone think?
As long as the photos from Tower Hill, I mean, I don't think you can see anything from Kennel, sorry. But just to make sure, as long as you can't see anything from Tower Hill, I don't see why there would be a public hearing. But if they do, then I think people need to know.
So if you could submit those, like, get a key map, show where you're taking the pictures from, in which direction, indicate on the map where the solar panels will be, send those to John and Judy by the 16th, 1 week from today, and then we can have a better sense of whether or not we should authorize the consultants to draft up a resolution for the planner.
Okay, I'll have another, you go.
Or set a public hearing for sometime next.
It's easy enough to just drive past. That's what, so if we provide the photographs, I'm gonna drive past your kids to see it.
Yeah.
I try to, but it's not always so easy when you're still driving down purchase for work.
Yeah, I'll get more of the ones that look like this, so you can see the date and time, and also which direction they're standing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'll be fine.
It's the reverse of that.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, with that in mind, I suspect, having driven Tower Hill Road a number of times to look at the paving, that you're not gonna see much, but I would, just for the record, request authorization, we can have a draft resolution ready for the 23rd, and if
Yeah,
it fails, we can put it on the shelf, but,
fine.
okay,
Good idea.
very good.
Thank you.
And do you want hard copies or email or both?
Well, I'm not gonna be here next week, so I prefer the PDFs.
Yeah.
I have my computer with me, but.
Email them, and we'll circulate them by email, I'll send them around to all of you folks. Okay?
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next up, 81 Randall's Road.
Thanks, Mitch.
Hi. I'm Jennifer Preston with Shelter Design and Architecture. I'm here with my partner, Pedro Morales, Shelter Design Architecture, and the civil engineer, Evan Pendleton from Insight Engineering. We're ready to answer any questions or hear your comments. This is our first meeting, so give me a little guidance into how much you want me to say, how little you want me to say, and we're having context about the site, about the client, the aims of the project, and then answer the comments that we received from John. Can I call you John or Mr. Andrews?
John is fine. Mr. Andrews was my father.
Okay, so we got a memo from John. We're ready to discuss those, do a little bit of back and forth, and we assume this is the beginning of the process.
Yeah, I guess just give a little introduction to the project, what you're proposing to do, and then we can review John's memo and talk about next steps.
Okay, cool. Thank you. So it's a single-family home project, and our clients are Laura and Stephen Holt. They consider this their family home. They are getting a little bit older in their years, and their kids are in their mid-20s to 30s. The intention of the design is to provide a place where the family can gather all together. They'd like to age in this home, and they'd also like to be able to have their kids and their grandkids have a couple bedrooms to sleep in. So that was the impetus they gave us for this project. It's a complicated site. It's a tiny, weird shaped parcel. And we understand that there are some variances that we're going to have to apply for. So we're happy to discuss more about that. I thought it would be helpful to give you guys a little bit of a tour of the site. So we brought photos. And I can bring these over closer. Are you able to see?
A little bit.
Yeah. So this is the house as it exists right now. Have you guys driven 81 Randall's Road at all?
Yes.
It's like, just to give you an orientation, like the track back, if this is a track back segment.
So here's
Yeah, I
Leedsville.
got that.
There's a road that goes to Troutbeck.
Yeah.
There's it, and then it's actually, you guys, your client owns this, and this, but, well, they're the owner of record for all three of these parcels, but the parcel that you're talking about is this smaller 3.3 acre
That's
parcel
correct.
that fronts
And
on
they-
Randall's Road.
That's correct. And they absolutely want to maintain those two parcels without any development on them. That's why they purchased them. They're very conservation minded. It was the directive they gave us when we were developing the project. So we understand that there is an impact to any building project, but we've done a lot of work to offset that impact through wetland reclamation areas, mow strips, and Evan's going to speak a little bit more about that. But just to give you guys a bit of where we are, it's hard to do this with things. So, picture number one, I'll start with that. It's basically on this little triangle.
Once you hand it to me, I'll hold it and you can.
Okay, thank you so much. So picture number one is here. This is Benton Hills Road and this is Randall's Road. This is what it's here, right? So we're here, that's picture number one, two little mailboxes, and this is where we'd like to put the addition. Couple reasons why we put it there. There's a nice kind of flat part of the site. Everything else is a steep drop off to the river. It's also where when all this foliage comes in, it's where you can't already see the river. Whereas on the other side, you can see here, when you're driving down the road, you can see the creek, and we didn't want to include that. So that's part of why we've located the addition where it is. Picture number two is right here, so the existing house and the addition, and we're sort of looking at this steep drop off. And that's going to come up when you guys ask questions about FEMA. We're just showing you that now. Picture number three, we're much closer to the creek and we're looking up at the corner of the property. So you get a sense of the topographic drop off, right? And then picture number four, we're on the other side of the house. This is where we're going to connect. This is the same view, just a little bit of a zoom in. So this is these are the two places where we're going to put cased openings. And there's going to be a little bridge connection, a little conservatory with a low roof to not preclude the view from these two windows, and then the other additions. It's like two kind of buildings connected by a breezeway. Very farmhouse aesthetic is the intent. So is that helpful to kind of get a little bit of a tour?
Yeah.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah, much better than reading on the computer section.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. That's all I'm gonna say. Pedro, my partner, is ready to discuss. Do you want to go through the?
It's up to the chairman, it's up to the chairman.
Do you have more to add, or?
Well, I mean, I'm ready to speak to the memo that was prepared by the engineer.
Okay,
I
let's
think
do
Jen
that.
did a very good job
Oh, thank you.
summarizing what got us to this point, and our client's wishes on the site. You know, like you said, they want to stay in the median. We are happy members of the
Can you
community.
come up to the mic, please? Thank you.
I was saying that they are happy members of the community. They would love to continue to age and have a multi-generational single family home. And we think that this design starts to be.
John?
Okay, as the young lady said, this is a fairly complicated site. It's in the rural residential zoning district, which is a 5-acre minimum. It is, portions of the site are in the floodplain overlay, which she addressed. The stream corridor overlay, in fact, the entire site is within 150 foot of the top of the stream. And the valley bottom, there's a small portion that's in the scenic protection overlay. Doesn't make sense, but it comes from the other side. So it's the back of the lot. And then they're in the very bottom aquifer. The property does contain an existing single-family dwelling unit with an existing well and on-site wastewater treatment system, and it's 3.5 acres. The project it's fairly complicated. They're putting an addition and a modification to that single-family home, and their application includes an accessory dwelling unit, a single-bedroom accessory dwelling unit. The existing well and on-site wastewater treatment system are to be abandoned and properly abandoned and replaced with new. They're proposing wetland mitigation plantings and other appurtenances. The Town of Amenia Code Enforcement Officer issued a letter of denial dated April 7th, referring the application to the planning board for site plan approval. Okay. Unfortunately, the project exceeds one of the thresholds for a minor project, alteration of an existing structure or expansion of such structure by 1,000 square feet. I think this approaches 3,500, if I'm not mistaken. So unfortunately, it must be treated as a major project and a public hearing will be required. As indicated, the area is in an area of special flood hazard. It's an unnumbered A zone, and the way it lays out, it affects that very small nip of a corner right there.
Area in yellow right there.
Which is actually, we don't actually meet where the FEMA line comes to because.
It's an unnumbered A zone, so there is no base flood elevation, so.
Right, which
it-
one?
So, they would need a floodplain development permit, or they have proposed that they would like to apply for a conditional letter of map amendment indicating they're out of it. That's up to them to do. The town has no involvement. They can follow that track if they wish. We would need that before the project could be completed.
Have you initiated that process?
We have
Christine?
a contract to sign and moving on, so.
Okay. Portions of the project site fall within the 100-foot adjacent area to the New York State DEC freshwater wetland AM5, which looks like it extends along the bank of the creek plus a little bit upland on the one end. The bulk of the improvements appear to fall within that adjacent area. They're going to need a DEC permit. And I would suspect you've already started that process.
Yes, we have.
Okay. Now,
You did your wetland flagging, JP.
So, we delineated the wetland last fall. Every kind of insight. We had a DEC out last fall, delineated the wetland and had it survey located. We submitted the beginning of this month to DEC for the freshwater wetland grant.
okay, now this is where it gets complicated. This is an existing lot of record. The existing lot does not comply with the lot acreage and the front setback requirements for the district that it is in. It's not 5 acres, it's 3.5. The front setback is today 33.7. The front setback required is 40. So likewise, available records suggest that the lot has been in existence since before January 1 of 2007. That's significant because that's the date of adoption of the current zoning code. So the lot predates the zoning code. If I go back far enough, I think records, the first house was built on this lot somewhere around 1955. So it's been an existing lot ever since then.
That 3-acre lot.
That's 3 acre, that's correct, sir. Likewise, the existing structure appears to have been in existence prior to that same January date, although it was renovated in the 2011-2012 timeframe. The project, unfortunately, therefore falls under section 121-27, non-conforming uses and structures. So, under that particular category, it requires a special permit to allow for the expansion of the non-conforming structure. The proposed expansion increases the non-conformity. The front yard setback gets reduced from 33.7 to 32. And the size of the addition exceeds the allowable increase threshold set forth in the code at 50%. They're probably going maybe 250%. I wasn't sure of the numbers, but They're making it substantially bigger. It would appear that they need a couple of variances from the zoning board of appeals. The other thing, pursuant to section 121.28, any residential use on a non-conforming lot is limited to a single-family dwelling. The accessory apartment is therefore not permitted, even though accessory apartments may be considered in the zone because the lot doesn't comply. So they likely require an additional variance from the ZBA. Unfortunately, I'm going to defer to counsel, in his opinion, that may constitute a use variance. So that's a significantly heavier lift in terms of getting a variance. So that's complicated. That's set of complications number one. Set of complications number two is that the proposal falls within the stream corridor overlay district, with the entire lot falling within 150 feet of the top of the bank of the stream. I think the 150 feet almost extends all the way to the road.
To the road, yeah.
Site plan approval is required from the planning board for any project that's greater than 500 square feet in footprint. The footprint is substantially bigger than 500. And the code further goes on to say that the existing, what I need to say is the existing structure falls within 100 foot of the water course. Okay? Per section, per the applicable code section, no principal structure can be within 100 foot of the road, of the water course. It's a non-conforming structure, and the proposed addition only serves to increase the non-conformity. Council, in conversation with council, he would suggest it's probably appropriate to get a variance, but the way your code is written, on lots that were in existence as of July 19, 2007, I don't know why that, I think there was a modification to the stream corridor overlay at that point in time, permits the planning board to modify the setback requirements, providing it meets certain standards in the code. So there's two ways they can go. They can get a variance from the ZBA, since they're going for a bunch already, it's just another addition, or absent that, you folks could make a, they would need to look at the requirements, demonstrate a case, and you could waive that for a principal dwelling. It's up to you and them to some degree. It appears to be an unlisted action under seeker. It doesn't rise to a type 1. There are multiple approvals. Paul and I had a discussion. Paul's of the opinion that you could probably handle this as an unlisted action subject to uncoordinated review. That would allow them to go to the ZBA. I had originally said coordinated review. He doesn't think it's necessary to do a coordinated review because the biggest lift here is going to be the ZBA issues. So Paul would like them not to be burdened by trying to go through the whole site plan process and then, wait for seeker to be closed. So I think I would defer to Paul, and I would recommend you classify it as an unlisted action and allow it to be subject to uncoordinated review. The other agencies then do their own review, no less protective of the environment. Nothing's going to happen. So that would be the way to go. The agricultural data statement needs to be amended. It needs to reflect both site plan and special permit and the zoning variance. And although this parcel is not in the ag district, the other parcels they own aren't in the ag district. There are surrounding parcels, as we all know,
Yes,
way too well, that are in the ag district.
Yes.
What's that?
Right in the center.
And so it has been our custom and practice, if it is in the district, whether it's a working farm or not, and unfortunately most of these around tend to be working farms, they need to be provided with due notice, so your agricultural data statement needs to be amended. We're going to need Dutchess County Health Department approval, and then the way this is situated, they've got 2 driveways out to Randall's Road. The town highway superintendent is starting to have issues with 2 driveways, so our recommendation is you need to reach out to the town highway superintendent and talk to her. Particularly when these driveways are in close proximity to the road like that, what ends up happening is we have a tendency to have people back out onto the road, which she's not a fan of. And I know you had some, details about parking areas and other things, but you need to reach out to her first.
You can see that happens right now.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
not, it's not great, yeah.
And she doesn't like to make it worse, and, so, and she's pretty reasonable, but you do need to reach out to
For sure.
her. And so, our conclusion is, there's not much you folks can do, and they have the ability to proceed to the ZBA without requiring a denial or other referral, since it's part of their application. So both Paul and I would suggest that they revisit their application, truly identify what variances they tend to want to seek, and then go to the ZBA, and once they get what they got, they come back to see you.
I have a suggestion.
Please.
Have you, given that your client owns 50 acres,
right.
have you considered doing a lot line adjustments to create a conforming lot? You still need a bunch of area variances?
That is definitely not off the table, that is definitely something to discuss. We have a slightly different interpretation on the 50% limitation, as well as the accessory apartment within a single family residence. So those two heavy lifts, we came to a slightly different conclusion when we met with the planning examiner as part of our pre-application meeting. And so I'd like to speak to that a little bit, but yeah, absolutely, that would solve the 3.5 acre issue. If perhaps the lot line back along the creek could be moved and adjusted to become a 5 acre lot, that would be compliant. It would not address.
It gets somewhat contrived because you're jumping across the stream, but, and I think the deeds actually ran to the center line of the, but anyway, I'm not gonna, I'd be interested to hear what your different take is, because, both the attorney and I reached the same conclusion at different times.
So so you state the project falls in a non-conforming lot section, under section 121 and 27. That 50% limitation cited applies to non-conforming uses and non-conforming structures. So the proposed addition is a conforming use, it's residential. The existing use on site is not a non-conforming use, it's also a residential use. So extending that use by 50% does not contradict.
No, it's not necessarily, it's the use and the structure. The structure is not conforming.
So the existing structure will remain as is. It's an existing non-conforming structure, we are not changing it. The addition respects all of the lot line setbacks.
Creative.
It's creative, but you're parsing words. It's an addition. You're expanding an existing footprint. And the way it's been interpreted, and you're free to have your counsel talk to planning board counsel who is absent tonight, but I think absent, something to the contrary, I think we're gonna stand by the 50%, we've done it. It's historically been that way.
You also can't have two principal structures on a lot, so if you're gonna make the argument that it's, in and of itself is conforming, then you have two principal structures on an already non-conforming lot, which are also required to do.
And with the 5 acre would, I mean, one of the non-conformers is the fact that it's 3.5. But you're saying the two principal structures would be a non-conforming application as well.
Why is it only on the table to think a lot line adjustment?
Well, we identified the issues of the 50% addition as the first and foremost thing to kind of resolve and get clarity on. Because even if it were a 5 acre lot, we'd still be dealing with given the stream corridor overlay and the setback from the water line, we'd still be dealing with things.
But that's an
Absolutely.
area variance,
But-
which is a lot easier to get than a use variance.
And I mean, personally, it leads to the concern that the only reason you would not want to make a lot line adjustment is you want to preserve the economic viability of selling that other lot, at which point we now have, so,
Well, I suppose so, but we would only be getting an acre and a half from one of the other lots, so it wouldn't.
well, you don't only have to carve off an acre and a half. I mean, you can do something that sounds appealing
Yes.
for the acreage issue, that makes it easier to look at.
I just think that you won't likely meet the burden of a use variance, right? The 5 criteria, it's just, it would be self-imposed, it would be difficult for the ZBA to issue a use variance for this. So if you can find a different way so that you don't have to apply for a use variance, it would.
The use variance would only be for the
Yeah.
accessory dwelling unit.
Yeah.
The way Paul and I looked at this, we didn't think any of the variances were necessarily difficult to obtain, the area variances. I mean, to this gentleman's point, there's an existing house there. It's within 100 feet of the stream. They're putting an addition on it. They're not getting any closer to the stream, I don't believe, with this addition. They are getting slightly closer to the road, and I'm sure a creative architect who has some degree of artistic license can move that back to.
We can, yes.
So having worked with enough of them, there are certain ways around that. But to me, and honestly, to be blunt, to reduce, to contrive a subdivision, to add an acre and a half, to your point, particularly since a lot of this lot is defined by the road on one side and the stream on the other, and they don't own the parcels on either side, it becomes a contrived subdivision, then it jumps across the stream, so I think it's an existing lot of record, 3.5 to 5 is not a heavy lift for our ZBA. So what we were thinking is, the only thing that Paul and I are really, we're concerned about is the accessory dwelling unit, because that is unfortunately a use variance.
Yeah, so on that one again, so that was the other part of it, that we came to the conclusion that as per the definition and for the section 121.12, the accessory apartment is permitted within a single-family dwelling, and it does not have an impact on zoning density. So it wouldn't change the use.
I understand what you're saying, but if you look specifically at the code section, since you don't have a complying lot, it's not permitted. You can only have a single-family home, so
Is
But
it
accessory apartments are permitted in single-family homes.
it's not the way the code is worded, but I'll grant you that.
Okay.
But I think it's not a great strategy potentially not a great strategy to try to parse the words.
Well,
Throw the eye of the needle.
since they're going to the ZBA anyway, it's not my job, it's not your job to interpret the language of the zoning code. They can ask the ZBA for an interpretation. They can make the case that he's making to us to the ZBA. And the ZBA can, in their infinite wisdom, rule yea or nay. So,
They are not going to, I mean.
stranger things have happened, Madam Chair.
It would be difficult for you to defend the
Yeah.
standards.
For the ADU, you mean?
Yes.
And if we were to expand the acreage to 5, do you think it would be easier for the ADU to be approved because it would make the lot conforming? Is that correct? Even though the lot is still kind of non-conforming for other reasons.
It's one less hurdle.
Well, that's
How
right.
about that?
Okay.
That's right.
Yeah, but you still gotta get through the subdivision process, and I'm not quite sure how this board's gonna look at that subdivision process. That's, there are ways to do it, and
We appreciate the advice.
Absolutely. And we acknowledge that there are several moving parts. There are a lot of things to juggle on this one.
but to your point, it's probably worth the ask
Yeah, for sure.
for an interpretation.
Yes, yes.
So,
Thank you.
since you're going through ZBA for all the other ones,
Is it appropriate to ask how that process kind of unfolds, or should I do that with Judith? Because Judith's the big guy, yes, in a amazing way.
you folks need to go back and identify exactly what you want,
Okay.
and then you would just file the application with the ZBA. And this would be put on hold until you perfected that application and got a determination from them.
Perfect.
The requirement, the ZBA require, you have all the list, the application for ZBA, what you need to produce and what you need to get on the agenda,
Okay.
those guys, yeah.
Any other questions while we're together? Or
You
comments?
guys had what, you have what?
US.
Sorry, I didn't mean to burst your bubble.
It just is
You
like,
actually didn't give us anything we weren't expecting, but we really appreciate the guidance we've been getting. So
well,
thank
yeah,
you.
I mean, like just sort of objectively, if you're building a structure that requires multiple use variances, multiple area variances, a use variance on a non-conforming lot in the stream corridor overlay, with FEMA requirements, DEC wetlands, blah, 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 like whatever you can do to take one of those things off the table.
I will not argue with that.
So,
And that's
We
why I
are
think
threading the needle for sure.
I think that's why Paul's advice to go with an uncoordinated review makes their life, it just makes their life a little bit easier.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you.
I hope we see you again.
Yes, we do too. I have to say, this is an extremely efficient meeting. I just want to say.
Thank you.
Glad to hear that.
Thank you very much. Last guy, Eli, he canceled.
They didn't want to sell the property.
Yeah, probably no longer for sale.
Other matters.
There is another matter that I think we think to put on there, and it's the way that Cascade Mountain Lanes, there's an issue with the consistency of the map.
There is
Have that on my list as a follow-up item.
an inaccuracy in their application,
Hi, thank you.
Peter Lynch are connecting.
okay?
Thank you.
So Cascade Mountain Lands, Peter's now here. Judy got notified by the former owner that he no longer owns it,
Mr. Chamberlain, Lyndon.
Lyndon Chamberlain. However, the application cites a different owner. The plat that they submitted as a preliminary plat indicates Lyndon is still the owner, and the sign indicated that Lyndon is the owner. So there's an internal inconsistency. So what they need to do is correct the plat, properly identify the owner, and you folks need to reauthorize holding a public hearing at the first meeting in May 14th, right? And that's, Paul and I discussed that's the only way to cure this.
There were a couple of other outstanding items for that. So we were gonna talk about minutes, but, current ownership was one. Flag lot, plans needed to be revised to show the flag lot, the waiver for the flag lot. The survey shows overlapping property lines on the north and south parcels. You were gonna put a note on the plat. The plat needed to be revised to show the SPO and any other district overlays. And that was also supposed to be in by April 9th. I don't remember at this point, but all of those other things also need to be addressed. Follow-up items on the minutes, just,
So what our recommendation is to reauthorize by simple oral resolution, holding a public hearing on this matter on May 14th, provided they get all the information that we just requested into the planning board prior to April 23rd.
Okay, so let's set a date for that submittal. Peter, what works for you?
April 23rd is 2 weeks hence.
Yeah, I think that we should be able to do that within 2 weeks, that shouldn't be a problem. So should it be on April 23rd or before April
On
22nd?
or before?
On or before.
Okay,
All right, and so we're gonna start doing that for all public hearings, like where there are things that are outstanding.
Yep.
You need to get everything to the end on at least 1 week in advance of the
Okay.
public hearing. In this case, it's a few weeks in advance, but you have the list and they're in the minutes.
okay.
So we just need that resolution for, just reschedule the public hearing for May 14th.
Make a motion to reschedule the public hearing for the Cascade Mountain Land for May 14th.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye. All right?
Yep.
Just make sure we got the right owner. And that doesn't fall entirely upon Peter, because Dutchess County, apparently the land's changed hands over a year ago. So there's been a taxable status date, so the records, at the county records should have changed, and they did not.
Yeah.
So,
I checked parcel access earlier today and it still hasn't changed.
yeah, it was set up.
I did too.
Because I thought I screwed up, and then I checked the application, and the application has a different owner, so.
Yeah,
Wonders.
okay.
Okay?
Well, perfect, thanks.
Thank you.
Minutes.
Have a nice night.
Minutes, I had a bunch of changes, I sent them to you, and also sort of reorganized a little bit, so we have follow-up items and dates for things when they're due. So let's try to do that, I think it's helpful for people, not only who are reviewing the minutes, but also for us. The silo DNA, are they on for April 23rd? submitted a bunch of materials.
I started my review, and they've given me everything I've asked for.
Okay,
He's actually submitting tomorrow.
okay.
You
so
might be
the list
submitting
is-
updated stuff.
Yeah, he's got some stuff.
All right, so John, the list of stuff that we talked about is in the minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So in addition to whatever else,
Yep.
you asked us for.
Okay.
Then Cascade Creek subdivision, they had a bunch of follow-up items, but no date, so I don't think we need to talk about that.
They made a submission.
Yes.
Oh, they did?
Yes, they submitted a revised conservation analysis and some other things yesterday?
Yeah, I sent it out.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't
It was
know.
Monday, late,
Yes.
10 o'clock in the,
Yeah.
It came in really late.
Hold on.
I sent
Yes,
it
for
Monday
the
morning, or
23rd, yes,
Tuesday
we
morning.
did, yeah. It's there.
You have a hard copy?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna get a hard copy.
And you probably would be well advised, since you're talking about it, to have the director need to send a copy to the CAC as well.
It'll be all right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I was wondering if I was supposed to send that other one to, housing. The workers' housing. So I
Any day.
Any day?
But if he makes another submittal, send it to Bill.
Yeah, you mentioned that.
Which submittal are you talking about?
D and E needs to go to the housing board. You authorized that at the last meeting as well.
Yes.
We authorize sending the whole package when it's done,
Okay,
when it's full and complete for your
okay,
opinion.
all right.
So it doesn't make sense for people to be reviewing.
Yeah,
okay.
drafts.
Yep, I'll wait to see what the, Patrick submits, and then, because everything he submitted is generally correct. I got a couple minor tweaks on the subdivision plat, I don't see, but,
All right, so you're saying D and E, when John signs off, goes to the housing board. And Cascade, when John signs off, goes to
CAC.
the CAC. All right, I don't have that in my.
well, actually, I don't need to sign on, I don't need, I would not, the submission that Cascade made is the conservation analysis. That's for you folks. I wouldn't need to sign off on it, so I would suggest that at the same time you're getting it, the CAC should get it, because it directly relates to what they've already commented on.
Okay.
So I would not wait, and I would get that out to them as soon as possible.
It already went.
It went.
So they got something to do.
Okay. Any other comments on the minutes? I'd like to reiterate the, motion that was made by Jim Walsh,
Yeah.
just, for the record.
Susan Walsh.
Blah, blah, blah.
You said about that.
Yeah, and then, anything else? All right, then motion to close, adjourn,
It is subdivision.
pending some revisions.
Yeah. You're
As
gonna send,
amended.
Okay.
as amended, will you send us out again,
Sure.
please?
All right. There's a motion.
Who's motioning?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
All right.
All right, motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in
All
favor?
right.
The farm, the woman that was gonna give the farm presentation?
She's on for next week, or the 23rd.
Can you just run through quick who's on for the,
Yeah.
there, what they're on?
The ag discussion, Jennifer, what's her last name?
Finkel.
Condo D&E, silo. We have to take the Cascade Mountain Winds off now.
Yep.
Keen Stud subdivision, individuals,
With George.
yep, and Cascade Creek.
So if anybody wants hard copies of
Yeah,
all
come on
the
up.
stuff,